What is going on, guys? I'm gonna make myself a little bit bigger here so you guys can see me. All right, we're gonna be talking about training versus exercising. And after this training, you guys are gonna realize why I am so freaking against group workout class because there's literally no structure. There's really no way you can get progressive overload systematically. You lack specificity. You have a lot of variation, which is actually not a good thing for progressive overload. You don't have the ability to recover or time it. You have way too much volume and you don't have enough volume to actually track. You have good intensity, but that intensity will actually result in potentially an overload, which will overload your tissue for potential injuries. From here, you don't have adequate rest. You have consistency, which is good, but you lose mind-muscle connection. There's so many other reasons why. We're going to touch on this. And so today we're going to be talking about training specifically for building muscle. Okay. So like, how do you build muscle? Like, what's like the number one thing that you can possibly do to actually stimulate muscle growth? So muscle is an amazing thing. It's something that everyone should have because the more muscle mass that you have, the less likelihood you're going to have decay or atrophy, which means you live longer. If you live longer, that's great, but also it's going to reduce risk of injuries. You have more functionality. You're just going to enjoy life a lot more. Okay. So training, how do you actually build muscle? You should be not pushing until absolute failure, right? You should be close. You should be pushing close to failure. That means you can do one rep, right? You can probably do one more rep, maybe two, but definitely not three. Okay, that's a really good indicator. And if you guys need an example, this one will show you what something looks like very close to failure, where I could probably do like a half rep, right? I could do half rep and then I'm done, right? And that if I did a full rep, what's gonna happen? I would go here and I'll start to do stuff like this, and that would result in like form failure, which is absolutely not what you want. Absolute failure just means that you're fatiguing the muscle, and then you feel like you can't go anymore, so you just let it go. Okay. And that's a really good way to actually get enough muscle stimulus without injuring yourself. And so muscles work only two ways. You can either increase mass or decrease mass. You can either build them up or they can get like smaller. Okay. That's basically how all it works. Okay, there's some nuances around like muscle fiber conversion where obviously there's like a portion of someone's genetic potential where like percentage of their tissue is like faster twitch. So that is more contractile tissue versus someone that's more like, I guess, like slow twitch. So there's less of that really quick stimulus around the muscle fibers. So that's some nuances there, but they still work through building muscle or losing muscle. Okay. Strength training is all about increasing muscle mass, endurance, overall physical strength, and it's all through resistance training. Okay, so these are the main principles for strength training. And this is basically like years of just me going through school, freaking 7 years plus, and just like understanding this, reading ton of textbooks, and I'm just making it very simple for you guys. Okay, so progressive overload is literally, aside from just like pushing to close to failure, it needs to be going through something called progressive overload. And you probably hear this time and time after again. What is it though? Okay, so basically it's continuously increasing the resistance or load on your muscle to force them to adapt to grow stronger. So you can either do this by increasing weight, increasing reps, or intensity of the exercise as your strength improves. So I'm gonna give you an example. Imagine I'm doing 10 squats, okay? And I'm close to failure, right? That's like my limit. That means you're pretty weak right now, okay? So if you're doing 10 squats, okay, you can either progressively overload by increasing the number of reps that you do next week, okay? So next time you do this, you do 11 reps, right? And as you can kind of see, if you just increase the number of reps that you do, what's going to actually happen is you're going to end up like increasing the number of reps that you do, which then if you continuously do this week after week, you're going to be doing 100 reps in no time. So if you do 100 reps, that's going to take you so long to finish one set of an exercise versus just increasing the weight by like 2 pounds, in which you can still do like 10 reps, but now you have like 2 pounds, you're holding on to it. So that's increasing the demand. You're going through a progressive overload of the muscle tissue in a very systematic way where you're not going to get injured, or the likelihood of injury is going to go down because it's very like systematic. Okay. So as you kind of see, if you go to a group workout class or they go to like a fitness class, whatever it is, they're like, hey, pick up a weight, you just try this thing, you just do it. Right. And then you have like no rest time. Well, it's like a circuit training. How many reps do you do? I have no idea how many reps you do. Well, what did you do last time? You have no idea what weights did you do last time. So now you just go through the cycle and you're doing like, you lose track of like how many reps you've done. So you maybe have done like 55 reps or something. And maybe last time you did like 30 pounds and you did, there's no way to track it. right? So it's like you're kind of just guessing. You don't even know if you're actually progressing or overload. And then you lose the specificity side of things. Oh, I'm getting heated right now, right? So anyways, specificity is basically the definition is training should be specific to your goal. Okay, so focusing on muscles and movements that are relevant to the strength or performance outcomes that you want. So this is where, going back to the manifestation letter, why this is so important. Because my goals might be different than your goals. And there's a reason why this guy doesn't look like the Hulk, right? It's because that's not my goal. That's not the thing that I want in life. You know, I don't want to walk around and like have difficulty touching my shoulder or like wiping my ass and stuff like that. I want to be able to be fast. I want to be able to be fast twitch. I want to be able to like burn a shit ton of calories from just being alive. I want to be able to like run and sprint. I run my kids, stuff like that, right? And so that's like my goal. So my training needs to be specific to that goal. And so if I'm doing like, and here's like something that is hopefully pretty cool. If I was doing like a half squat, like a squat, and I'm doing half the range of motion, now that would actually be really, really good for me because that's the type of performance outcome that I'm looking for. Why? Because when I'm jumping, you don't do like a full squat when you do jump. You actually do like a quarter squat, maybe like a half squat. Okay. So by getting stronger in that range that's specific to your sport or the functionality that you're trying to do, the better you are at performing that movement. Whereas if your goal is hypertrophy and you're like, hey, Dex, like, I want bigger quads, right? I want my quads to be like ginormous. I want like teardrop, stuff like that. I'm like, hey, based off of that being your goal, your training needs to reflect that. That means in order for you to get the stimulus, you're going to go through a full range of motion, which means your depth of the squat really matters, right? You're going to go through a time under tension. You're going to be going close to failure, right? Each and every single time. And so that's where specificity is quite important because the main difference between like performance training versus like someone that's training for like hypertrophy, you're going until like really, really close to failure, like very, very close to failure. Like it doesn't have to be every single rep or every single set, but it needs to be, you need to feel that stimulus. Whereas like when I'm training for like sports and stuff like that, a lot of our athletes, in fact, when we train for power, we go for like maybe 1, maybe 3 reps max. And so when you're doing that, you're not feeling like physically tired. Like energy is going to be pretty good, but you're looking for like intensity. Like when I'm moving this weight, how much of that bar, like is that bar moving quickly? Am I getting that intent going? Is it close to 100% of your max output? And then as soon as it's dropping to like 80%, that's when you take a break because then you need to build up the nervous system, which is a huge part of like strength training. That's like another story. Okay. Cool. So application, if you want to build like upper body strength, prioritize exercise like bench, presses, pull-ups. If your goal is to improve leg strength, focus on squats, and then just some nuances around the specificity around how you should be training, depending on the thing that you want to try to achieve. Okay. So sports, lower reps in terms of like only for like the power side of things. If you want to like build muscle, you need to be close to failure. So in fact, when you're actually like pushing for like close to failure, you could hypothetically like build pretty good mass if you just did like 6 reps and you're close to failure. The reason why is because you're getting enough stimulus, you're getting time under tension, like the muscle fibers is contracting through the tissue, you're getting full range of motion. So you're still going to get hypertrophy gain. Now, when you compare this, someone that does like 6 reps versus someone that does 12 reps, guess who actually gets more hypertrophy gains? It doesn't matter. Like in the literature, it does not matter. The thing that truly matters is this, that you're going close. Yeah, you're going close to failure. You're going close to absolute failure. Okay. So that's like the main takeaway for this. If you're pushing hard enough at the gym, you're doing 15 reps, but you're like chilling, you just hit 15 reps, like you're not going to get that stimulus. And so in order for you to get this, which everyone should be pushing towards close to failure, not to absolute failure, right? As soon as you start to feel like things are not feeling good, it kind of feels wobbly, that's when you stop, right? That's where a lot of our clients will benefit from. Okay. So that's basically like the main takeaway from this. Okay. That's why it's the top. So variation, okay? One of the big reasons why people don't get results in like group workout classes is simply because they change their workout routine way too much. Or the issue is for some people, they don't change it enough, right? So variation is quite important depending on the individual. But I need to emphasize, most often than not, too many people change their exercises too quickly. So it'll be like 3 weeks, it'll be like 3 weeks, I'm gonna do the same thing, and I'm gonna change it completely like the next phase. You're not gonna do any of the same overlap, okay? That's not how programming works. It shouldn't be like a complete 180. It should be like based off of this, these are the things that you need to work on. This is the weakening, lagging part. We'll continue doing this one because this is really, really important. And variations kind of like, imagine you're shooting like a basketball. Every single time you shoot a basketball, it gets better, right? So you want to keep doing that, especially for the muscles or exercise that you're not very good at. AKA for a lot of people, it's going to be like a front squat or like a split squat or something like that. right? So application after exercise, sets, reps, intensity, continue to progress. For example, switch hypertrophy, strength, power focus phases. So power focus phases is basically the difference between like someone that's going through like a strength power building phase where you're kind of like going for 5 reps versus someone that's more like athletic based. You're going for like power. So power is basically force times velocity, right? And if we broke down force times velocity, doesn't mean nerding out a little bit. It's basically just like how quickly can you move like heavy weights. That's basically what it is. And so eventually we want to get our clients and our athletes towards like a power based movement, because that's when you start to get like that fast switch side of things. In order for us to do that, you need to have hypertrophy, enough muscle mass to handle load. You must have enough strength. You must be able to do at least 2 times your body weight, stuff like that, certain KPIs that we want to hit. Then you can go into like power based exercises where you're doing like, squats with like a barbell and jumping up with it. You do cleans because you can actually carry it and you're not going to hurt your shoulder from that stuff. You need to have like a certain baseline strength before you move into like purely power phase exercises. Okay. So recovery, muscle, like the main thing that we want to understand for recovery is there's tons of things out there, gimmicky stuff like red light therapy, sauna, cold plunge, all that stuff. Theraguns, like there's so many things, right? Foam roller, stretching, all that stuff. And those things are great, right? And it definitely helps you. Like recovery is one of the main reasons why people get like muscle growth and stuff like and strength. It's one of the things that we've emphasized at the UFC. Like in fact, some UFC fighters train like twice a day, even 3 times a day, right? So they need to be able to sleep to recover. So we actually tell these guys to sleep like 10 hours a day, which is a lot of sleep in order for them to have the same recovery so that they can train the next day. Now, if you're not an elite athlete, like 10 hours might be too much, but for the most part, 8 to 9 hours is really the benchmark that a lot of our people, of our clients, should be reaching towards. There's so much literature around sleep where if you sleep longer, you will literally live longer. So it's one of like the highest lever things that you possibly do, and you need to be able to make sure that you have adequate sleep, right? So application, ensure you're getting sufficient sleep. Consider active recovery like cardio and stretching, which is great on like Sunday and Wednesday. But the main caveat here is if you think about like all the modalities that's out there right now for like recovery, the main thing is sleep. So you would not like wake up early, sacrifice your sleep to like go into like a sauna. That is not recovery, right? The main thing that you need to get is maximize your sleep. Make sure that you're in deep REM sleep. We're gonna have a training on this later. But sleep is like the main thing. Like if you're tired and you're not getting enough sleep, the rate of injury like goes way up. In fact, there's like some studies that look like some volleyball players that like didn't have sleep. Like a big chunk of those guys like got injuries not from like not stretching and warm up and stuff like that. It's literally because they don't sleep. They haven't slept enough, right? Okay, so volume is one of the kings for like training. Volume is basically the total amount of work done in a workout session, defined as a number of sets and reps. Okay, and so when we think about like volume, we look at the volume per week, right? How many times have you hit X muscle group close to failure? And that's like our volume. That's like the data that we look at. And when we apply it, basically, higher volume, more sets and reps is typically associated with more hypertrophy growth, while lower volume with higher intensity focuses more strength and like power, right? So this was and power. And the reason why, especially if you're like close to failure, like, let's just say you're like both close to failure here, and both are stimulating muscle group. So the benchmark here is if you're going like maybe like 2 to 5 reps and you're close to failure, according to the literature, you're going to get more hypertrophy gain from that 6 number, the rep 6 and higher, which is like kind of cool. But the main caveat here is if you think about like time under tension, like the main caveat is let's just say you did like 3 reps of something, but the way you did it took like 30 seconds. Like you're doing a push up, it takes like 30 seconds. You're feeling muscle fiber ripping. Well, and then you did another one that took like 30 seconds, but you did 6 reps. Like which one will actually help you have more muscle stimulus? They're both going to be the same, right? And so this is what the literature says, but it doesn't actually define like specifically time under tension, which is basically how muscles get enough stimulus. Muscles grow when there's stimulus to the growth. So that means if you're doing a bicep curl like this, you're feeling this muscle, right? It's going to get stimulus here, right? So whether I do 2 reps, so 2 reps like this, where it's like really, really slow, right? Imagine I did that again, versus like 6 reps, right? But the same amount of time was executed in both exercises, you're probably going to get the same amount of muscle stimulus through that muscle. It just matters that like depending on the range that's going to get exposed to, then you're gonna get like different stimulus as well. So in this region, this is like where it gets really biomechanically like crazy. Your arm is going to be out in this position, which means you're going to be stressing your deltoid. So when this one's tired, you're going to get your long head bicep to take over. So if you did it here, you're going to be way more stimulus into your bicep because it's more stabilized. Okay. And so we're going to talk about this at a different time. So intensity. Intensity is basically the amount of weight lifted relative to your 1 rep max. So you do like, let's just say you can do like 100 kilos for like a squat. For the most part, you could be working with like 70% 1 rep max. That will allow you to do like 3 to 6 reps. If you do like 60 to 75, it's going to be around 8 to 12. So this number is going to be like 70 actually. 70. And this one's going to be just for a bit more clarity. So rest between sets, depending on like the type of training that you're doing, if you're doing strength focus, right, you can be aiming for like 2 to 3 minutes per set. For hypertrophy, you get like 60 to 90 seconds. For consistency, obviously, you guys got to stay consistent. Like that's like one of the most important things, so that you can get adequate volume. Volume is the thing that we're looking for. So let's say we create a program for you. It's like for 4 days, right? You need to complete them so that we get adequate volume per each desired muscle group for the end of the week. And if you don't hit that, it means that we're going to be missing on some volume. It's going to affect kind of like your aesthetic component. The stimulus is going to go down, and that's where you're not getting the most value. Okay. Mind muscle connection. Okay. So mind muscle connection is basically when you're doing a bicep curl, right? Do you feel this muscle contract, or do you feel like your anterior shoulder is like taking over and you're doing stuff like this, right? So when you have really good mind muscle connection, right, this is where it can actually enhance like the muscle recruitment and thus stimulus to that muscle group. Okay. So the thing that I was going to talk about here, what I was going to talk about later, I wanted to talk about it later, but I think it's quite appropriate now. So I'm just going to add it in. So when we're talking about like intensity, okay, this is really just like some nuances that I think is quite cool. Okay, so if you were to get like free weights versus machine, and you got like the same subject doing X amount of weight, X amount of reps, X amount of time under tension, which one will develop more muscle fiber? Is it going to be machine, or is it going to be free weights? The answer is actually going to be hypertrophy for machine. The reason why is because you actually eliminate the stability component. Okay, so think about it like this. Imagine I'm doing like a bench press. Okay, when I press this way, the bar could actually move in different planes. So the more upwards it goes, potentially you can be using more like anterior delts. And then from here, you start to extend from your elbows. You could be recruiting your triceps. Okay, now if you're planted, you're actually in a really great position to like get the whole stretch of your pecs, and you push out. You do the flexion, you do horizontal adduction, which is the components of the pecs. You're going to get the most amount of contraction in the machine because it's basically loading that tissue like crazy. And more importantly, there's no stability component. Okay, there's no stability component. You don't have to use your shoulders to like stabilize, so you can just literally just focus on pushing out, feeling that squeeze, and getting that muscle stimulated. Okay, whereas if you're looking at like a free weight, because of the stability component, your muscles will now have to use the energy and resources to stabilize that component, which then reduces the amount of effort that you can actually load that tissue, which then means that there's less effort, less load going through that tissue, which results in less stimulus. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. But aside from that, this is like a really sweet rundown as to like training versus exercise. And by adhering to these principles, you can really create a magnificent strength training routine that's honestly going to help you. Like when you finish this program, you're going to understand why you're doing exercises, how to actually develop depending on your goal, and a bunch more. So hope this training was really helpful, guys. It's freaking awesome. By the way, I wanted to show this. So this is what it looks like to be close to failure. So leaning forward, leaning backwards gets more of like this part of the chest. And then this is where I could do one more rep. Oh, look at that. I could do one more rep. And then from here, there's no way I could do that one. All right, guys. Peace.